Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're hitting the open road, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Right.
We're exploring the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. We've got a really detailed overview here, looking at their journey, from Texas to, well, everywhere.
Exactly. It traces the history, the structure, membership, their reputation, the whole thing.
And our goal today is to sort of look past the usual headlines, understand the core of this group, where they came from, how they work, and what their global footprint actually means.
Yeah, to really dig into the details from the source material and hopefully get a clearer picture.
And one thing that jumped out at me right away, this huge international group, thousands of members, like over 20 countries,
Yeah.
all started by one guy, a dock worker in Texas.
It's quite something when you put it like that.
And the story behind their name, their logo,
Yeah.
that fat Mexican caricature, there's maybe a bit of a twist there too.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it.
So the beginning,
Yeah.
San Leon, Texas, March 4th, 1966. That's ground zero.
That's it. Founded by Donald Eugene Chambers. He was 36, a dock worker, as you said.
And the name Bandidos.
Well, the document says he named the club after Mexican bandits, figures who, lived by their own rules.
Right. That definitely sends a message from the start.
Absolutely. And he started recruiting pretty locally, right?
Yeah, from biker bars, Houston, Corpus Christi, Galveston, San Antonio, spreading out in Texas.
And they quickly adopted that 1%er label.
Explain that a bit. What's the significance there?
Okay, so that term comes from this possibly apocryphal statement by the American Motorcyclist Association.
Right, the AMA.
Yeah, supposedly saying 99% of motorcyclists are law-abiding citizens.
Leaving that other 1%.
Exactly, the outlaws. And clubs like the Bandidos embrace that. It's like a core part of their identity, setting themselves apart.
Interesting. And it seems like a specific group really fueled their early growth.
Yes, the source mentions that by the early 70s, they were already over 100 strong, and many of them were Vietnam veterans.
Ah, okay, so that probably brought a certain dynamic, maybe a shared experience.
You'd think so. That kind of shared background, maybe a bit of disillusionment too, fitting that outlaw image, camaraderie already built in perhaps.
Okay, so moving forward a bit, leadership changes, and they start looking beyond Texas, beyond the U.S. even.
Right. In 1972, Ronald Jerome Hodge takes over from Chambers.
Hodge. He had some nicknames, didn't he?
He did. Mr. Prospect, apparently, because he moved up so fast. And later, Stepmother, sort of echoing Chambers' own nickname, Mother.
And under Hodge, they go international.
Yep, 1983. First chapter outside the U.S. is set up in Sydney, Australia.
Wow, Australia. How did that happen?
Founded by a guy named Anthony Mark Spencer. He'd apparently met some bandidos over in the States and took the idea back home.
Fascinating. A distinctly American thing, finding roots down under.
And then Europe wasn't far behind.
Marseille, France, 1989. That's the start of their European presence.
A major step, yeah. But that expansion, especially into the Nordic countries in the 90s, that wasn't exactly peaceful.
No, the document mentions a pretty violent feud with the Hells Angels. Sounds serious.
Oh, it was. Big time. Both clubs trying to establish themselves, leading to, well, significant conflict. It's a recurring theme, unfortunately.
This competition for territory.
Exactly. And leadership kept turning over, sometimes with legal troubles attached.
Like James Edward Lang, the third international president. He faced charges in 98.
Right. And his successor, George Wiegers, president from 98 to 2005, he was actually convicted.
Convicted of what?
Racketeering. In 2006, basically engaging in a pattern of organized criminal activity. It shows the kind of legal heat these clubs often face.
There's also that push into Canada, wasn't there? Which didn't end well.
No, it really didn't. They merged with the Rock Machine Club in Montreal around 2000.
Trying to get a foothold.
Yeah, but it kicked off a really brutal biker war in Quebec, mostly against the Hells Angels. By 2003, they'd basically pulled out of Quebec.
And
then, by 2007, after a really horrific internal incident, the Shedden Massacre, their Canadian presence just dissolved.
a grim chapter.
Definitely highlights the violence, both external and sometimes internal.
The document also mentions a shift in the structure around that time, 2007.
Yeah, the Western Hemisphere chapters. So the U.S. ones primarily became autonomous, separate from the European and Australian leadership.
Interesting. And the U.S. chapters even redesigned their patch in 2011.
They did. Maybe signaling a bit more independence or a shift in identity over here.
Okay, let's talk about the symbols. That insignia is probably what most people picture. The fat Mexican.
It's iconic, yeah. The caricature, sombrero, machete, pistol, it's attributed to the founder, Chambers.
Now, I read something about a connection to the Frito Bandito, the snack mascot.
Right, that story's out there. But the timing,
Hmm.
it's a bit off. The Frito Bandito mascot actually came out after the Bandidos Club was founded.
Oh, okay, so maybe just a coincidence? Or the idea was just sort of in the air?
Could be. Or maybe the popular mascot later got linked to the club's image in people's minds, even if it wasn't the original inspiration. Hard to say for sure.
Makes sense. What about the colors? Red and gold.
That's their scheme. Red lettering on a gold background. And that choice does have a clear origin.
Which is?
The U.S. Marine Corps. Chambers was a Marine vet, served in Vietnam, so he took the Marine colors for the club.
Direct military link there.
Hmm.
And these patches, the colors they wear, they're not just decoration, right? They mean things.
Absolutely. They show rank, chapter affiliation. But law enforcement believes some patches signify, well, darker things.
Like what?
Well, the source notes that law enforcement connects certain patches to criminal acts. For example, there's supposedly an Expect No Mercy patch,
And that means...
awarded, allegedly, for committing murder on behalf of the club.
Jeez.
Yeah. And others, like TCB law enforcement, thinks that means taking care of business, maybe for officers or nomads, and CDG, coup de grace, potentially for significant violence.
So these patches are like a coded resume, almost, but a very grim one.
In a way, yeah, a form of internal communication and status marking. Definitely intimidating.
And their mottos reinforce that whole image too, don't they?
Totally. Things like cut one, we all bleed. That's about solidarity.
God forgives, banditos don't.
Right, their own justice system, our colors don't run, loyalty.
We are the people our parents warn us about.
That's embracing the rebel image head on. And you hear BFFB a lot too.
BFFB.
Bandidos forever, forever Bandidos. It's all about that lifetime commitment, that separation from the mainstream.
So who becomes a bandito and how does it work inside? It's not easy to get in, is it?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
First off, it's male only. That's standard for these kinds of clubs.
And you need a bike, obviously.
Yep, a Harley-Davidson primarily, though the source says some other American-made bikes might fly.
In the process.
It's stages. You start as a hangaround, just associating with the club.
Okay.
Then, if they like you, you become a prospect. That's like an apprentice. Then finally, full membership, but even that starts with probation.
How long does all that take?
It varies. The chapter president decides, but it's not quick. They're vetting you.
Vetting for loyalty, commitment,
Mm.
and making sure you're not law enforcement, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Screening for infiltration is a huge deal for them. Trust is everything.
And this detail about signing over your motorcycle title, that's intense.
It really is.
Yeah.
Shows the level of control and commitment the club demands. Your bike basically becomes club property in a way.
Wow. And inside a chapter, it's pretty organized.
Very. You've got a president, VP, sergeant-at-arms, who's like the enforcer road captain, secretary-treasurer, a whole hierarchy.
And lots of rules.
Tons of rules, bylaws about everything. Like, you can't wear your patch in a car or truck. Only on your bike.
Makes sense, image-wise.
And mandatory meetings, they call it church, 4 times a month. Mandatory rides, too.
What happens if you miss those?
Fines. And if you miss mandatory rides, you could even lose your bike. They can take that title you signed over.
So it's this weird mix, isn't it? Rejecting society's rules, but having incredibly strict internal ones.
That's a core part of it. Their own code, their own laws.
Yeah.
The philosophy is loyalty above all. All members are your brothers in your family. And zero cooperation with the cops.
And everything, even tattoos, belongs to the cup.
The regalia does, yeah. Patches, vests, even specific tattoos are considered club property. Reinforces that collective identity over the individual.
They collect dues, too, right? For expenses.
Yeah, membership fees cover things like funeral costs, though, interestingly, not for suicides. No official Bandidos funeral if a member takes their own life. Also for legal defense funds, which you can imagine they need.
That detail about suicides is telling. How many members are we talking about worldwide?
Estimates are usually around 2,000 to 2,500 members globally.
And in the U.S., mostly white and Hispanic guys.
That's what the source indicates, yeah.
Okay, let's zoom out again. How does the whole thing fit together beyond the local chapters?
There's a structure. You have local chapters, then state or regional officers, then a national structure, usually regional VPs reporting to a national president.
And above that?
An international president, El Presidente. Technically has authority over everything, though we mentioned that autonomy split in 2007.
Right, and these nomad chapters, what's their deal?
Nomads aren't tied to one place. They often handle things like security, maybe counterintelligence, internal discipline. sort of the troubleshooters or enforcers for the wider organization.
Gotcha. And the original mother chapter is still Houston.
Still used in Texas, yeah.
And the overall reach, how many countries are we talking?
The source says 303 chapters across 22 countries. It's pretty spread out.
North America, obviously. 93 chapters in the U.S., mostly Texas and the West South.
Right. 16 states mentioned. And we talked about Canada not working out, but there's also Costa Rica since 2004.
Then Oceania, Australia was first. Now 45 chapters there? That's huge.
Yeah, big presence down under. And New Zealand since 2012, smaller but growing.
And Europe's got around 90 chapter.
Roughly, yeah. Started in France, then the Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, then Germany, Italy.
Spain, Belgium, UK, Ireland.
Yeah.
It just kept growing.
Pretty significant expansion across Europe. They were even looking at Russia and Eastern Europe at one point, apparently. Netherlands actually banned them, though, in 2017.
First country to do that.
First to ban the whole club outright, yeah.
And Asia, too. Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore.
Yep. Thailand came via merging with a local club in 2001. Malaysia and Singapore followed in 2006. So, yeah, truly global.
What about these support clubs mentioned in the document? What role did they play?
Ah, right. These are smaller clubs that are affiliated with the Bandidos, kind of like feeder clubs or allies.
How do you spot them?
They often wear reversed colors, so gold border, red background, the opposite of the main club, and sometimes a heart patch in Bandidos colors.
And what do they do?
They could be a source for new recruits for the main club. They add numbers, provide support, and sometimes they're used to carry out criminal stuff at arm's length from the Bandidos themselves.
Like plausible deniability?
Something like that, potentially. The source lists names like amigos, pistoleros, hombres, reinforces that wider network.
Okay, brings us to the tough part. The criminal allegations. Law enforcement doesn't exactly see them as just a writing club.
No, not at all. Major agencies, US DOJ, Europol, Canadian and Australian authorities, they classify the Bandidos as an organized crime group, a syndicate.
One of the big four in the U.S.
Yeah, alongside the Hells Angels, Outlaws, and Pagans.
Yeah.
And what are the big six in Australia?
And the alleged activities. Pretty serious stuff.
Very. Drug dealing, gun running, prostitution, extortion, money laundering, murder. The list is long and matches what you see with major organized crime outfits.
Which led to that ban in the Netherlands you mentioned. Threat to public order.
Exactly.
So, wrapping this up, key takeaways. We've seen this group go from like one guy in Texas to this global entity.
Yeah, a huge evolution. They've built this distinct culture, rules, symbols, a powerful identity.
And a pretty fearsome reputation.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating look at how these subcultures form, organize, and survive, often straddling that line between brotherhood and, well, outlaw activity.
From the Texas docks to chapters across the planet, it's quite the story.
It really is. They've created this incredibly strong internal cohesion, this us against the world mentality, symbolized by their patches and mottos. And despite all the conflict, the legal pressure, they've endured and spread.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe. Considering this history, the violence, the criminal classification by police forces worldwide, what does their continued existence and expansion tell us? What does it suggest about why these kinds of outlaw cultures still hold an appeal in our modern world? It makes you wonder, doesn't it? About what draws people in, the social dynamics inside.
It does. What keeps these groups going despite everything? It's complex.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.